First tonight, the race for the White House heats up today. At 9 p.m. East Coast time, the first debate in a rematch of 2020 gets underway. The former U.S. President Donald Trump and the current one, Joe Biden, face one another in front of the television cameras in Atlanta, Georgia. President Biden has been rehearsing with advisors in Camp David, and former President Trump has been campaigning and also preparing. There's a lot riding on this debate for both candidates. They are the oldest candidates to run for president in the history of the U.S., and the question of age and fitness may well feature prominently during the debate. The two men are currently more or less tied in the opinion polls, and this is how the U.S. TV networks were trailing it a short while ago.
The most anticipated moment of this election, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The president and the former president, one stage, moderated by Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. The CNN presidential debate, Thursday, June 27th at 9, live on CNN and streaming on Max.
Meanwhile, the two main contenders in the race to become Britain's Prime Minister have faced off in what's been described as a spiky television debate organised by the BBC. It's their last direct encounter before the general election next week. The issues of trust, taxes and youth unemployment dominated the debate between the Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his Labour Party opponent Keir Starmer.
Because he's not sure, like I am.
Earlier in this Parliament, the Prime Minister himself was convicted and fined for breaking the rules which he brought in and imposed on everybody else.
I also think leadership means being straight with people. It means having the courage of your convictions, not changing your mind on every single position that you've taken and being upfront about what you want to do for the country. That's not what Keir Starmer is doing. He's not being honest with everyone about his plans to raise their taxes.
Right, because they're not being processed, they cannot be returned to where they came from. Can they, Prime Minister? If he wants to correct that, now's his chance to do it.
I'm very clear about where we'll answer. Well, do you know where these people come from?
No, he's not answering the question.
Do you know where they come from? Iran,
you can see.
Syria, Afghanistan. So when Keir Starmer says he's going to return people, is he going to sit down? Are you going to sit down with the Iranian ayatollahs? Are you going to try and do a deal with the Taliban? It's completely nonsensical what you are saying, right? You are taking people for fools, right? I think that these people should not stay on our country. They will be on planes to Rwanda. That's what I will do with them. You still can't answer the question. What will you do with them?
All the tens of thousands
all the illegal migrants who arrive will be
Rwanda.
processed and put on planes to Rwanda. There is a choice on that question at this election, because Keir Starmer is not matched my pledge to reform the Equalities Act to pass new law. That is the only way to deliver on what Vicky says. And the reason he won't do that, I don't know, but he can explain, is because he's not sure, like I am, that when it comes to these matters, sex means biological sex, and that's how you protect female-only spaces and services.
Keir Starmer?
Yes is the answer to the question. It's very important that we protect women's spaces. But what I will also say is that I do recognise that there are a small number of people who are born into a gender that they don't identify with, and I will treat them, as I treat all human beings, with dignity and respect.
Jolly interesting, isn't it? Well, for more on this, let's cross live to London and speak with our special correspondent, John Cookson. I know you will review that British election debate for us, John, but let's first of all go to the one that's yet to happen, the one in America. Tell us more about the significance of that debate. I understand it's the earliest debate ever to be held in the US, with more than 4 months still to go to that election.
Hey Charles, good to see you here. The most significant TV event certainly in recent decades. These TV debates started in the US back in 1960 when JFK, Kennedy famously did much better on television than Vice President Nixon. Nixon not prepared at all for the debate. He was seen with beads of sweat on his forehead. JFK, on the other hand, suave and sophisticated and sailed through and did a lot for his chances. Here we are in 2024 and who knows what we're going to see tonight, because so much of this is unpredictable, although CNN have laid some pretty stringent ground rules. First of all, Charles, this is not a town hall debate as in the past, and that's the first time since 1960 there will be no audience. Now, observers say that no audience will be not helpful for Trump, because as we know, he plays all the time to the audience. He delivers laugh lines and expects a reply. He'll be in the dead atmosphere of a CNN studio in Atlanta, so we'll have to see how he fares with that. Biden, I think, has probably been preparing pretty well, as we discussed earlier in the week. He does particularly well in these big set-piece events like the State of the Union earlier this year, and I think he will be well prepared. I'm told, or I understand, that Biden is ready for a bombastic Trump or a calm Trump. The Trump camp is saying that they've urged their man to remain calm throughout. So that's the first point. There'll be no audience for either men to play off. There'll be no autocue. They'll only have a notepad and a pen. There'll be 2 commercial breaks when they'll be able to consult with their advisors. And crucially, Charles, the CNN are operating a muted microphone system now. This means that even though the 2 men are no more than 8 feet apart, they could touch each other if they leaned. If one speaks, the microphone of the other is off, so Trump can't overtalk Biden as he did in the last debate in 2016. It's a very sophisticated microphone system, a directional mic, and even though Trump is speaking, you still won't be able to hear him. He may be mouthing stuff, but viewers won't be able to hear when his microphone is switched off, and the same applies to Biden. They've already drawn lots on the positioning in the studio. Biden will stand on the right, and that, as any TV advertising executive will tell you, to be on the right of screen is always better, because the human eye is drawn more to the right than the left. And Trump will get the advantage of a closing argument to leave a lasting message to the viewing public. 70 million viewers are expected to tune in tonight, Charles, for this clash. And I need to point out also that here in 2024, millions more will be getting clips on social media. Possibly more people will see on, Trump and Biden on TikTok or X than they will on TV, which is a new phenomenon. What can we expect from Biden? Well, I mean, he's going to for sure suggest that Trump is a crybaby who doesn't accept the result of the last election. He'll accuse Trump of soaking up to America's enemies like Putin and Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and of course he'll raise Trump's recent conviction for illegal payments to a porn star. Now, what Trump is going to say, he's such a maverick, we just don't know, but we can fairly assuredly know that he will talk about inflation in America and the poor state, a relatively poor state of the economy. But as I say, his people are urging Trump not to go rogue, not to shoot from the hip, just keep it calm. So who's going to win, Charles? Hard to say at this stage. Biden just has to prove that he's not the doddery old man that he's portrayed as being, certainly by the Republican Party, and Trump just has to show that he's not a crazy person.
I like that. Well, that might be difficult, John, but in any case, I mean, the polls, of course, deadlocked, as it were, between the 2 candidates, so they'd need to come up with anything and everything to shift that dial. And I suppose people will be looking out for the gaffes as much as anything, won't they? And it is those moments that in the end will probably really matter.
Absolutely, and you said quite rightly that they're neck and neck in the polls. However, Trump is slightly ahead in some of the swing states like Nevada and Pennsylvania, according to opinion polls. So it is. There will be elements. Something will happen tonight, or several incidents will happen during this debate, and this will influence a lot of undecided voters. So that, of course, adding to the significance of what's going to happen later this evening.
Well, that's an up sum of the American one. The British one, of course, has taken place already. The two men battling it out on immigration, Brexit, the betting scandal, etc. I understand it was an immense shouting match, and they were often talking over each other.
Yes, it was pretty scrappy. I stayed up and watched it. It's hard at this stage, after 6 weeks of campaigning, to say who exactly did well. I mean, Sunak was jumping up and down in his usual enthusiastic way. Starmer solid and steadfast. And Sunak was hammered to an extent by Starmer over the integrity of his government in the recent so-called Gamblegate affair. And but Sunak, as you showed in that clip, scored a couple of points on immigration, and that was a key question as to what is Labour's policy on immigrants. You know, is Starmer going to sit down with the Ayatollahs or the Taliban? Well, of course not. So that means, you know, what is he going to do with illegal immigrants in this country? At least Sunak had a policy and reinforced the policy that the Rwanda scheme is in place to deport illegal immigrants to Rwanda, and the Labour Party are set to scrap that if they win. So, as I say, a scrappy debate on TV. Not good polling tonight for Sunak. Latest opinion polls, the Ipsos poll put Labour on 41% and the Conservatives on 19%, with Reform, of course, run by Nigel Farage on 15%. Lib Dems are doing well on 11% and Greens are on 7%. And a poll yesterday, British people were asked what their opinion was of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, and only 20% gave their approval, and a massive 75% of people in Britain say they were dissatisfied with Sunak's performance, and that's the lowest approval rating since Jim Callaghan and the Winter of Discontent in 1979, Charles.
Well, I mean, it certainly is not looking good for the Conservatives, is it? They were also facing questions, John, from the audience. What stood out for you in terms of their answers as they tried to convince voters to come to their side?
Well, the thing that really stood out to me was one particular questioner who stood up and jaws dropped when he said, "Do either of you men think, why do you think you're fit to run the country?" Which drew gasps from the audience and sort of left Sunak and Starmer nonplussed. That was the most difficult question I think that they faced, but of course, being media trained, they sailed through it. I think the key moment, as I mentioned, was that issue on immigration, which Sunak won a point there. But still so many millions of people remain undecided, and we'll have to wait and see how everyone votes in the poll, which is, of course, the general election on July the 4th, which is just a week from now, Charles.
And I think that point you made about that very revealing moment when a member of the audience asked whether the two leaders were really the best the country has to offer. I mean, there was a massive cheer when that happened, wasn't there? I mean, very significant and you know, highlights, I suppose, the background to this election. So really, John, the British people have a week to decide. What about those crucial undecided voters? Did either of the two men, I mean, I don't know if you'd know at this point, manage to sway them to their side, or is it difficult to say?
It's hard for me to say, but what I would say in general terms is this, that although Sunak does a good performance, it's very, very clear that the British people are giving Sunak and the Conservative Party, it's been in office for 14 years now, a very big thumbs down. They want change, and whilst they're not especially enamoured with Starmer, because many people say he's very boring and he flip-flops on policy, they want change, and Starmer represents change, and he's getting the leading number of votes in the opinion polls at the moment. So that's the situation, I think, as far as undecideds are concerned. I have to say also that many people will be voting by post as well, so they've already made up their minds. But I think we can be fairly certain, Charles, that there'll be a change of government on July the 5th, the day after the general election, with Keir Starmer in number 10.
John, you've certainly sold the American one to me. I'll try and see if I can stay up late and watch that one. But thank you very much indeed. John Cookson is a RISE special correspondent. He was talking to me there on the line from London.